Welcome to the Daily Influence, where our mission is to deliver a daily dose of positive influence that can uplift you personally or be shared within your sphere of influence. While not every episode may directly apply to your unique circumstances, we strive to provide insights and inspiration relevant to most people's daily, weekly, and monthly lives. Whether you are tuning in during the morning, noon, or night, the Daily Influence is here for you. Listen, share, and embrace the power of influence in your life. Hey everybody, Brian Smith here with the I and Team series and the Daily Influence. We started this latest session of discussions about leadership and understanding our responsibility. And now we're going to talk about the failure of responsibility. And what does that mean? We've defined in the last two episodes what individual responsibility is, and we've defined what leadership is, at least in our context and in our opinions and in our experiences over the last 27 years. But what does failure of responsibility look like? And it looks like a lot of things. Each of you within your areas of influence, whatever that might be, have seen failure. You can define failure of responsibility a lot of ways. And failure is like throwing a pebble into a calm pond of water. The consequences can work out, and there are unintended consequences of our failures that we may not feel for days, weeks, months, even a year. Just this morning, I had to deal with a client who was served papers that they owed money to somebody for something they didn't know anything about. To this moment, we still don't know what the root cause of the problem was because nobody's ever informed us that we even had this liability for our client. Our client is unaware. Somebody has failed in their responsibility just to communicate that there was something that happened within the company's area of influence that created this liability. Unfortunately for this client, it's a repetitive problem that we've been working with for a long time. And this client is the poster child of failures of responsibility. And it goes pervasive through the organization, individually as an organization and individually as different groups within the organization. But we're unraveling it. And our clients' eyes are wide open. And as we move through the process of remediating failure of responsibility, we can build that back up. One thing we don't do is sweep over it, put a Band-Aid on it, and move past it and hope that we can come back. That in itself is a failure of responsibility. When you identify that there's a problem, you need to get to the root cause of the problem and begin remediating that problem. You need to at least become aware that you have a risk, and that risk can be something that you accept. You might accept the fact that you have a manager that makes poor decisions, yet you keep that manager in place as you try to remediate. You put structure in. But you have a responsibility to understand now that you've become aware that you are now part of that problem. You are part of that failure until it is completely remediated. As long as you allow a failure to be possible with your eyes wide open, you're now part of it. You can't neglect to be part of it just because you say you delegate it to somebody else. If you haven't come up with the final solution yourself, then you become part of that responsibility. And that's where holding ourselves accountable to what we do, what we say, is so important. It's why having structure and getting to the root cause as quickly as we can is so important. It's why understanding what our responsibility is as individuals is so important and defining it early. If we don't define responsibility for people, how can they be responsible? And you can say, well, it's common sense. Really? I ask you, is everything common sense? Is that our common answer to a problem that we know we knew the answer to and we just expected or assumed somebody else to. It's just common sense. And while I'll admit there are a lot of things that should be common sense in today's world, they're not. And unless you clearly define things, areas of responsibility, clear understanding of what that means, then you yourself are part of the problem. That's why we are so much into smart management. We are so much into being very specific, providing measurements when we can, understanding attainability, not just for ourselves, but for our teams and those people on our teams. Being realistic about our expectations and discussing which or what is real. And then understanding what timeliness means, not setting expectations that are too long or too short, not being just in time unless it's supposed to be just in time, not procrastinating for reasons that don't make sense to the whole team. Specifics matter and responsibility matters. And without specifics, without SMART, it's really hard to hold yourself or anybody else responsible. And it's really hard to get to the root cause of those failures. And when we get to the root cause, you should do it in a smart way. Specifically find out what the failure was. Measure it where you can. And as you're doing that, begin thinking about remediation and thinking about the ripple effects, because your solutions, you have responsibility for those also. And if you delegate solutions without empowering people to do it, you are also responsible for the end result. Responsibility and failure of responsibility can be as big as the ripples will go or as small as you can contain them. You control those things. And when you don't set smart expectations, you allow for responsibility failure to get out of hand, out of your control, and create ripple effects and consequences for you and your organization that can quickly get out of control, that can quickly frustrate you. And you have nobody to blame but yourself if you're contributing. If you're the leader and you're contributing, then you got to start with you. I hope that you are tracking along with our individual and leadership part of our podcast this week. We are really getting into what leadership is, what the responsibility of influence is, and how we are responsible for our failures. And we're going to continue to move through all of these areas of influence we have as leaders in everything that we do in the next coming weeks. I hope you have a great day. Actually, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week.